front row because we're going to walk out with Levine.
That was a good one. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Before we get going, I want to take care of a little leftover business from last week. First and foremost, I want to thank so many people who have reached out and said some really nice comments, left me some messages about last week. But I did receive some feedback that perhaps occasionally my language got a little salty. So to address that, I would like to start the presidential swear jar. So I believe it was 3 times. So we'll just see what happens this year, because when I get nervous, sometimes it gets a little salty. So anyway, thank you. I will do my best. For everybody here, thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy your time. Check in on social media if you want. Let everybody know where you are. But also, enjoy the time. Turn the phone off, take a little break, enjoy everybody's fellowship. I'd like to ask Carol Sobczak to come to the podium, deliver a reflection, and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Carol.
Thank you, President Travis. My fellow Rotarians, let us first pray for a successful Rotary year for President Travis, and let it be productive, successful, and happy, and full of nice memories for everyone. And as I look around, I'm blinded by the camera, I see how fortunate we all are here. We're fortunate and grateful to have the food on our plates, the fellowship at our tables, and the successes in our life. So let's not be complacent in our gratitude. As I heard in yesterday's gospel reading at my church, the mustard seed is the smallest seed, but after it's planted, it grows into a very, very large plant. And I was thinking about Rotary and the seeds we plant. So let us share our gratitude and our good fortune with the rest of the world by scattering many mustard seeds and watering them and watching them grow into mighty plants. Please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I would like to thank, as you see up here, I'd like to thank our corporate members this year. For those who aren't overly familiar with the corporate memberships, we're putting a lot of emphasis on it this year for a few reasons, obviously membership being one, but more importantly, we as a board look at corporate memberships as a way to reverse a trend that Rotary International is seeing in clubs throughout the world, and that is fewer and fewer C-level executives joining the clubs, but rather middle management, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we see corporate memberships as a way to possibly drive more of the C-level executives joining, but also identifying people in their organizations that they feel are the future, not only of their companies, but also of social interaction and charity and being the future of Rotary. So for those of you in the audience who think that maybe this would be a great avenue for your organization, feel free to talk to Jackie, myself, anyone about what a corporate membership for your organization could look like. And we'll go from there. So I appreciate all the ones you see up there. To begin our meeting today, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Walt Churchill's Market and Canal Dwar for being our meeting sponsor. So a round of applause, if you would, for Walt Churchill's Market. Does anyone have any guests they'd like to introduce today? Ooh, it's a good one.
I think Adam's a hot commodity today. President Travis, I would like to introduce Allie Dresser. She was with the Toledo Symphony for a number of years until last year when she ran away from home and joined Nationwide Children's Hospital. Our loss is their gain. She is in public relations and marketing at Nationwide Children's Hospital and a prospective Rotarian.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Glad you could be here.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Good afternoon, President Travis and my fellow Rotarians. It is my honor and privilege today to introduce to you Angela Landgraf. She's with the Area Office on Aging of Northwestern Ohio, and she is the Plan for Home Supervisor, and she is a prospective Rotary member.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. President, I have with me John Federke, an ex-member and soon to be roped into a membership again.
Attaboy,
Hopefully.
Murph.
Thanks, Murph.
Hi, John. Good to see you.
President Travis, fellow Rotarians, I have with me today Ashley Jordan, who is the new Toledo Club Membership Director. She's come from Detroit, and she's recently moved here to Toledo.
Excellent. Glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to welcome a guest from the Defiance Rotary, Craig Riedel. Craig is 27 years with Nucor Steel. He's from the Defiance Rotary. He state representative for 5 years, and he's running for Congress in Marcy Captor.
Oh, excellent.
So, Craig?
Thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Good to see you. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Emily Hughes, who works in the Community Relations Department with me at Sunshine Communities, and she's our database prospect manager.
Excellent. Welcome.
President Tangeman, you might recognize this girl.
Who is it?
This is our daughter, Bryn Tangeman. Summer is a wonderful opportunity to bring your kids to Rotary meetings. It's never too early to brainwash them. That's what we're doing. Yep.
Welcome, Bryn. It's nice to see you. Yeah.
Step up here. President Travis, joining me today is Alana Marshenko from Toledo Helps Ukraine. And Alana is helping by spreading mustard seeds, and so far she has successfully transplanted 14 Ukrainian families into Northwest Ohio. So her work continues, and if you'd like to learn more, you can find Alana right here. So thank you very much.
Glad you could be here.
President Travis. Wow, okay. I have the honor today of having two great representatives from the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. One I've known for a long time, and one I just met today because she's so aggressive. She invited someone to join her.
I love
today.
this.
So I'm going to have her introduce him. But Celeste Felice is with the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library and just a great steward here in our community and does so many great things. So we'll welcome Celeste.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I know. I mic for the short people. Well, thank you for that awesome welcome. And, you know, as they say, every woman has to have a great-looking man. I brought mine. And so, except that he's my boss, so.
That's smart. Smart.
But it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you Tawasi Ngor, and he is the regional manager for the main branch at the Lucas County Library.
Excellent. Welcome.
I'm beginning to feel like I'm the only one that didn't listen to Alec last week and invite a guest. But I did notice there's a number of Rotaract members in the room. And so I just wanted to ask the members of Rotaract that are here to stand. We certainly appreciate your participation in our club, so thank you for being here.
Welcome, guys. It's good to see you. I also understand we have a visiting Rotarian. So if you would. Oh, sorry. Come on up.
Thank you, President. My name is John Mannen, and I'm actually a native Toledoan, but I've lived the past 30-odd years in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. First person I met today said, I didn't know we had an Amsterdam in Ohio, and I don't know if there is, but it's really the one overseas. But I still consider myself very much a native Toledoan. I'm very proud to have come from this city, and it's always a great pleasure to come back and visit and join this Rotary Club. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. It's great to have you. Okay. Kevin Mullen, will you please come to the podium to introduce new member Dawn Bentley?
Travis, did you say where that money's going?
No.
Okay. I just feel like that's an important clarification. I told him, I said, I think there's certain words that are going to come out of his mouth that might need to qualify for a Paul Harris Fellow, but I'll let you guys decide where that is. He'll have that paid off by the end of the week. Very excited, myself and Yolanda Durden, excited to be able to sponsor Dawn Bentley to join our club. She's been in the club for about 6 months at this point and has gotten involved right out of the gate. We're excited to have her here. My path with Dawn goes back a number of years, and actually I think I met her through my brothers in their involvement with Camp Cricket. Dawn has been a champion for disability rights, for inclusion in our community for a number of years. She's got a deep relationship with the Rotary Club because she's worked for the Ability Center, 2 different stints throughout her career. And then recently launched her own consulting company to be able to help other businesses expand that work as well. Her organization is called CARE, and I'm pulling up my phone to get my notes because if I get this wrong, she will hit me. She's promised me that. Her company is called CARE, and it stands for Community, Access, Inclusion, Representation, and Equity. And she's a champion, as I said, for our in our community and helping businesses expand their own work in that area. She's an author. She wrote a coloring book that our own fine library has purchased a number of copies of to make available throughout the community. She's worked with Toledo Museum of Art. I think that's what most of your presentation is about today, right? Is about Dawn? All of it. Perfect. Wonderful. I'm going to hold you to that. She's also worked with the YWCA and the library, and she offers trainings in the community. I couldn't be more excited to have her passion, her expertise, and her hard work as a part of our club. Personally, about Dawn, some of you guys may have think you had a busy pandemic. Dawn calls hers the twindemic because she had twins during that time. I cannot think of a worse way to be locked in a house than with 2 identical aged children. Don't tell my kids I said that. I love them. But you know, when you apply to be a member, you list off pet peeves and you tell us what you like to do in your free time. And Dawn laughed and said, haha, what free time? But we appreciate the time she carves out for Rotary, and certainly she's a perfect representation of service above self, and we're excited to have you as part of the club. Welcome to Rotary.
Thank you all very much. I'm really excited to be here. You do not want me to bring my children with me to a Rotary meeting. We would be filling up the swear jar pretty quickly. We call those at-home words in my house. But thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited. I attended a number of meetings in my years at the Ability Center under Tim Harrington, and I really appreciate the work that Rotary does. So I'm excited to be a part of it on the other side now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome, Dawn. Moving along. I would like to ask Susan Palmer to come to the podium to introduce today's speaker, Adam Levine.
Oh, thank you, President Travis. I am very excited today to introduce Adam Levine. From the beginning of his tenure as the 11th director of the Toledo Museum of Art, Adam Levine has been very clear that he honors the best traditions of previous directors and founder Edward Drummond Libby, who, along with other Toledo leaders, began the museum in 1901. Mr. Libby emphasized quality in the products produced by his glass business and in everything about the museum. A reputation for quality at TMA is recognized in Toledo, where the museum enriches all of our lives with outstanding collections that amaze us because they are here in Toledo, benefiting our community. For instance, how many of you got on a school bus and came down to a school tour at the museum when you were in elementary school? Did any of you do that? Raise your hands if you did. Oh, yes. All right, there you are. As a teacher, I even brought my kids to the museum before I was really involved. So the museum is a gem in our community. So we have these outstanding collections, plus we have amazing programs that benefit us and educate us and engage us both emotionally and intellectually. And then we have traveling exhibitions that bring new and exciting works that make us look more closely and intently at works of art. But quality is embedded in every aspect of our museum's business, not just here in our community, but also nationally and internationally. And that is why TMA is asked to lend works of art to museums all over the world, and also to partner on thought leadership projects that are moderating the landscape for all museums. Recently, fellow Rotarian Tom Palmer and I were part of a group of TMA supporters who visited Oxford and London on a trip led by Adam and one of our TMA curators. While we visited major museums and had tours given by directors of those major museums, every day of that 10-day trip, we were in galleries that were wonderful places to view works of art and learn about works of art, and also in amazing private collections where the owners shared with us their ideas about collecting and why they were interested in collecting. Now, why did that happen for us? We benefited from the connections of Adam and our curator, but we also benefited from the reputation of quality that all of these people knew about the Toledo Museum of Art. So Adam Levine is definitely the right director at this time in the life of TMA. President Travis and fellow Rotarians, please welcome warmly Adam Levine.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. That was decent. Good afternoon, everybody. Much better. Now, allegedly, this is going to be working. Et voila. All right. Hi, everybody. Susan, thank you so much for that incredible introduction. Susan is not just a trustee of the museum, but she and Tom are quite literally the greatest supporters of our institution, and I could not be more grateful because much of what I'm going to discuss with you today is catalyzed by others. So we had a symposium on Friday. It's the first time the museum has had a symposium in quite some time, decades, perhaps ever. You'll see over the course of this presentation that I take great effort to understand the institution's history. And we had 200 curators from 70 institutions around the country come to Toledo to hear about what we're doing, but also to share about their views and their practice and what they're doing to reinstall their collections. This is something lots of museums are thinking about. And the director of an institution that's one of our peer institutions came, and I was having a coffee with her, and she let me know that this museum, which is our peer in terms of size and in terms of collection, ours is better, so I won't name the institution, but every July 1st at the beginning of her fiscal year, she gets a check for $17 million from the county. That is by statute in 1915, the legislature of that state made sure that property tax from that county would go to support that museum in perpetuity. So that institution now has a $40 million budget. The Toledo Museum of Art this year will have a $22 million budget with exactly $0 coming from the city, the county, or the state to support our operating budget. We are entirely free, as many of you know. We are also entirely private. So everything I'm going to talk to you about is only made possible by your support, by the support of people like Susan and Tom, by the support of so many of you in the room. And one of the things that is so important in Toledo, it's actually a great virtue of Midwestern museums in general, is that people in the Midwest feel strong senses of civic identity. And the museum is part of that. I mean, I want you to just imagine what Toledo, Ohio would be like if you took the museum's campus and just removed the museum. I actually want you to consider that future, that possibility, right? It's unfathomable what the city, what the Old West End, what Junction and Englewood would feel like without that anchor institution. So this community is deeply supportive of the museum, and I am so grateful for that. And the nature of the support tends to be oriented to the things we do in the community. And we have incredible community partners in the audience. We have trustee, but also CEO of Lucas Metropolitan Housing, Joaquin Citron Vega. There is no art museum in the country that has as robust a partnership with their public housing authority as the Toledo Museum of Art. We have Nationwide Children's Hospital, which supports our outreach efforts in the Junction, in the LaGrange neighborhood. We're so fortunate to have your support, Ally, thank you. We have incredible community partnerships, and that's what you think about, that's what you read about, that's what you experience. But what I want to talk to you about today is I want to talk to you about what we're doing outside of Toledo. I want to talk to you about our national and international ambitions. And the reason that's so important is because there is no institution in this community that can connect Toledoans to 5,000 years of human history across 6 continents other than us. There is no institution that can celebrate the apogee of human creativity because of our 120 years of focus on expressly the highest quality. And the intersection of that sense of quality with those global ambitions allow us to tell a rounder, more inclusive, and therefore truer history of the world, but also because the Toledo Museum of Art is a unicorn in the museum world. Truly, we are unique in that we have this platform to do things of extraordinary quality and extraordinary breadth, but we are small enough to be nimble. We can drive alignment, we can execute against our vision in a way that larger institutions can't. And there are a lot of people all over the world who are fascinated by that right now, and could support the Toledo Museum of Art even if they have no existing relationship to Toledo, just because that is really interesting, and pushing museums into the 21st century is something that tens of thousands of the billions of people on this earth are geeked out enough about to think, oh my gosh, Toledo could be a model. And that is why our strategy says that by 2027, the Toledo Museum of Art will become the model art museum of this country for our commitment to quality and our culture of belonging. We've spoken a lot about quality in the collection and the culture of belonging we're facilitating locally. I want to zoom out for the rest of this talk and talk to you about what we're doing nationally and internationally to help fulfill that vision, to do it through programming, connected to resources, which keeps the flywheel going. So I'm going to begin, maybe. I fell asleep, and now the punchline's gone. What am I pointing? Take 2. There we go. All right, there's a lag. Now I've got it figured out, everybody. I'm going to fill up this jar myself. Actually, maybe I'll just do it proactively. Am I allowed to do that, President Travis? So I want to start with our painting, Van Gogh and Auvert. Everyone will know this painting, I think. It's one of the fan favorites, right? Again, the Toledo Museum of Art model is not to have a room full of Van Goghs, it's to have as few of superlative quality. We happen to have 2 because the 2 that we have are radically different in iconography, but we generally only have 1 by a particular artist. So this painting, painted in 1890, is one of only 3 that Van Gogh paints, or Van Gogh or Van Gogh, it depends where you are in the world, right? If you really want to sound snobby at a cocktail party, you can say Van Gogh, right? But we'll say Van Gogh, because we're in the United States. So this painting, painted in 1890, is one of only 3 that shows this house. That house is still standing. Our curator emeritus of European art, who doesn't actually understand physical boundaries all the time, went and knocked on the door and tried to explain to the family that we had this we had this painting. And actually, he was invited inside and had a lovely tea. What's really important, though, about this slide is that this photograph, if you look very closely, is not against the dilapidated burlap that we will be replacing in our reinstallation in 2027. It's actually painted against a beige-colored drywall wall because it is taken, wait for it, because it is taken in Amsterdam, not Amsterdam, Ohio. Oh, God. So this is, maybe you can just drive the, yeah, so can we go back? Back. Perfect. So this photograph was taken by someone or by a family people in this audience may know, the Stone family, Christy Stone and Spencer Stone, were in Amsterdam recently with their daughters and went into the Van Gogh at Auvers exhibition and saw this painting and our other one in our Wheatfields painting, both painted in Auvers. And were immediately drawn to it, thinking, oh my gosh, this looks just like the one in Toledo. And lo and behold, it was. And we're going to come back to why this is particularly important to our international ambitions. If we move to the next slide. This painting on the right, which many of you may know as well, a portrait of Antoine Proust by Edouard Manet, roughly contemporaneous, a few years earlier than the Van Gogh on the left, on your left, was asked for loan to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Musée d'Orsay exhibitions on Manet and Manet's portraits. Excuse me, on Manet and Degas. Manet's portraits was our exhibition. And this was a pretty hard one for us to lend because we only have one Manet. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happens in those circumstances. But what I can tell you is that it was the 18th loan request from the Toledo Museum of Art that the Met had made in the past decade. Right, so this is something that happens fairly regularly, multiple times a year. Even though we try and collect only extraordinary objects so we have fewer, we are asked regularly by institutions all over the world. Now, in London, before Susan and Tom and the rest of our supporters arrived, I was in London for 3 days. I was doing work and I was visiting a private collector who is known for his Impressionist collection. And I was standing in his living room with 7 different Monet paintings. Okay. And the curator of his collection was commenting on how great our Van Goghs looked in the Auvers show and how great our Manet painting looked at the Musée d'Orsay and the Manet Degas show. So this might sound like erudite, right? And this might sound random, right? Like who really cares? Well, would you think that someone who has 7 Monets in their living room has the capacity to support the Toledo Museum of Art? Right? This is like knowing the batting average of your favorite baseball player. This stuff matters, right? So if we move to the next slide. So these artworks are lent all over the world, right? And this is just a sampling. These are not all of the artwork, all of the countries, but these are just some of the countries to which the Toledo Museum of Art has lent in my tenure at the Toledo Museum of Art. Right? It's a pretty remarkable list. If we move to the next slide. So we'll pause here for a second. These loans are ambassadors, right? These loans speak to the Toledo Museum of Art, speak to the quality of our collection, and there is in fact a joke in the art world, which is when you go to an exhibition, the Toledo painting is the best painting. That is the reputation that precedes us, and you should feel really, really good about that. And that's a really important point, a non-trivial point. This is not just about the art world, because what I have found, not being from Toledo, is that I have fallen in love with this place. And when I tell people I'm from Toledo, I sometimes get a blank stare. And it's not because Toledo isn't wonderful, it's because Toledo actually doesn't know how to promote itself. Toledo's reputation is kind of terra incognita. So what are people going to know about Toledo if we don't tell them about Toledo? Nothing. So what a great way to think about positioning the incredible city this place is, the incredible region this place is, the incredible infrastructure this place has, than by leading with what is truly an internationally significant museum. Now, I could end the conversation there. And end the presentation there, and everyone would leave, and everyone would feel very happy, and everyone would feel like this is great, right? The museum is an ambassador. People are paying attention to the Toledo Museum of Art, as they have for 120 years, right? The museum is not great because I've been here for 3 years. Thank you very much, Susan. But the museum has been great because of 120 years of directors before I ever showed up, because of community support from all of you and generations before, because of the vision of those founders, and because of the philanthropic support of so many. How do we take this international visibility and start to finally parlay it into something more? Someone who has 7 Monets in a living room in London isn't supporting any institution in Toledo right now. That philanthropy has no opportunity cost to our community. We spend a lot of time thinking about economic development as a community. We spend a lot of time trying to recruit businesses in, trying to keep businesses here. This is a different type of economic development. Every dollar that is invested in this ecosystem, whether it's for capital to put construction managers to work, right, or have construction managers sort of fill out rosters to build buildings, or whether it's to provide programming, which draws tourism, every single dollar that we can bring in from outside of Toledo is a new dollar, and every dollar you spend at the Toledo Museum of Art generates $1.40 of economic impact. So being able to connect to larger pools of capital from outside of Toledo doesn't just drive the museum, it drives our community. So if we're going to be at $22 million this year, and we know that one of our peer organizations has been able to grow to $40 million, then you can just imagine if we're able to grow to the capacity that we think this institution can, we're going to generate tens of millions of dollars of annual economic impact, and we're going to provide programmatic heft, which is going to help draw tourism, help augment quality of life, and get the flywheel for Toledo moving ever faster. So we have this incredible collection. We have these loans that are already on the road. How do we move beyond having a nice story about visibility that we pat ourselves on the back around and build a strategy? Well, it will not surprise, well, it might surprise all of you, but for those of you who know me, I am a historian. I'm a Roman historian. This is my background, so I care about history. And one of the ways that manifests itself is I'm in touch with every living director of the museum. I'll see Brian Kennedy in November. I've got an email from Don Bacigalupi in my inbox that I have to respond to that came through this weekend. I'm having dinner tomorrow night with Roger Berkowitz. And before Roger Mandel passed away, I was in touch with him every week, right? We basically had a book club. We were reading together. Now, for those of you who don't know Roger Mandel, next slide, please. Roger Mandel was the director of the Toledo Museum of Art immediately after Otto Whitman. He was recruited by Otto Whitman as the assistant director, and he was groomed to succeed him. He was the director of the Toledo Museum of Art from 1977 to 1988, and perhaps no director captured the international potential of the museum like Roger did. He was building off of the foundation that Otto had set for him, to be sure, but he had a vision for how to connect the Toledo Museum of Art with resources and collections outside of Toledo that was fundamentally predicated on the quality of the collection. So there's nothing new under the sun. It's really helpful to study what Roger did. And oh, by the way, Roger then went on to the National Gallery in DC to be the president of the Rhode Island School of Design and to be the founding consultant to the Qatar Museums Association in the Middle East. So I would say that his international bona fides are kind of beyond reproach. Just to be very clear, I'm going to be in Toledo for a very, very long time. This is not about those opportunities, but he was truly international in his thinking. So thank you. So Roger's vision was, what we need to do is we need to reinstall the collection. So everyone here loves the Great Gallery. The Great Gallery didn't exist before Roger Mandel. It was a hollowed out space that was sort of in those dimensions, but that red fabric, the Baroque Great Gallery concept, even the name, Roger Mandel introduced those things. It's actually one of the reasons you're going to hear me stop talking about the permanent collection, right? Nothing is permanent, right? The museum's always changing. Museums are always changing. We're adding things, we're reconfiguring things. So Roger thought, well, if we take what we have and we showcase it in a way which is really exciting, then we're going to create a lot of energy around sort of what it is we're doing in the community. And if we get that energy from the community, move to the next slide, we'll be able to support a more ambitious form of exhibition. Who here, since we had a lot of people who came to the museum as a kid, raise your hand if you remember the Age of Rubens show. Raise your hand if you remember the El Greco in Toledo show. Great. So these exhibitions were blockbusters. They drew hundreds of thousands of people, but more important, next slide, they generated significant national and international press. Here is a front page New York Times article about El Greco in Toledo, okay? Now, this might seem, again, like, well, who really cares? Well, think about all those people with the 7 Monets on the wall. What are they reading? Where are they? We are so fortunate to have a publication like The Blade. We are so fortunate to have an arts reporter dedicated, right? If you lived in a market like I did when I went to Jacksonville, which is an incredible place, but where if your paper is owned by private equity, there is no arts reporter, I can assure you. We're so fortunate to have The Blade. But The Times is what the people who we're trying to connect with outside of Toledo are reading. The Journal is what the people outside of Toledo we're trying to connect with are reading. So great exhibitions are a pathway to great visibility. If you move to the next slide. And visibility connects you with people in ways that allow you to broker relationships that come back to support the museum. So some of you may recognize Pablo Picasso in this photograph. So this is just to demonstrate the types of people that Roger was able to connect with. And to his left, or to Pablo Picasso's right, to your left, as you look at it, is a guy named Walter Barais. Walter Barais was the chair of MoMA. And for those of you who visit the Toledo Museum of Art and see any of our artist books, books that were created by modernist or mostly modern masters in the early 20th century, you'll see that they were all given by Walter and Molly Barais. So Walter and Molly gave hundreds of artworks worth millions of dollars to the Toledo Museum of Art and became members of a group that Roger created that was called the National Collectors Group. It was a group of about 20 collectors spread across the country, all of whom had some tangential relationship to Toledo. Walter's wife, Molly, was from Toledo, but he was able to use our exhibitions, use the visibility to connect with national collectors, and that group gave the museum about 2,000 works of art and about $12 million in 1980s dollars. Okay, so tried and true strategy, right? Use your collection to generate momentum, to connect resources to exhibitions, which will generate more momentum and more visibility, and use that connect to broader, zero opportunity cost pools of capital, right? So why do you have to reinvent the playbook? If it worked, it worked. If we move to the next slide. And here are examples of gifts that were given. An example of an artist book from the Bryce collection, if you move to the next slide, and our incredible collection, the second largest collection outside of Japan of Netsuke, also came from a collection named Richie Silverman, who was brought into the museum through this initiative. So moving to the next slide. So taking this, right, not needing to reinvent things, if we were to update this vision for the 21st century, right, and this is not hypothetical, this is literally what is happening right now at your Toledo Museum of Art. What would this look like? Next slide, please. Well, the world's changed, right? So in the 1980s, focusing on the nation was sufficient, right? But the world has globalized, right? Global wealth is, or wealth is distributed globally much more significantly. And starting in the 1980s, in Japan in particular, huge collections were amassed and private museums were built. And it began this trend, which is cataloged in this very short but really interesting book to anyone who's interested, called The Rise and the Rise of the Private Art Museum, i.e. not the rise and the fall, that we are in a super cycle of people all over the world generating wealth, being really serious about building collections, and being really interested in engaging with museums. Now, when I say all over the world, I mean all over the world. And we talk a lot about belonging as a community, but belonging is global, right? Representation is global. So connecting quality with belonging has always had as its premise telling a global art history that is predicated on quality. That means that the folks that we're engaging with are literally all over the world. I will be going to Lagos. I will be going to Addis. I will be going to Hong Kong. I will be going to Dubai, all in the next 6 months. And they're not just joy rides. They're to connect with people who are interested in what we're doing in Toledo and want to support us. If we move to the next slide. So one of the things which is a little bit different about the way we're thinking about our collection nowadays, how we're revising Roger's approach, is we're thinking about our collection as leverage in a way that he never really had to. Now, by leverage, for those finance people, I don't mean we're borrowing against it. But what I do mean is, so that Van Gogh that you saw, that was in Amsterdam, we lent 2 Van Goghs, right, to a show that the Van Gogh Museum and the Musée d'Orsay were doing. So we said, look, those are our only 2 Van Goghs. We need 2 back. So if you come to the Toledo Museum of Art right now, you will see an absolutely incredible Van Gogh on the right from the Musée d'Orsay. That is a late Van Gogh, kind of an homage to Millet. And on the left, you'll see a self-portrait. They're both up. They're going to be with us for 8 or 9 months. So if you haven't seen them, come see them. But we're able to extract things in return, and we're doing it somewhat more aggressively. I think that's a trend in the museum field, but we certainly are, asking for the so-called reciprocal loan. But you don't always do it in a tit-for-tat way. You want to pick your spot sometimes. So if we move to the next slide. So that Manet that I mentioned and said I would come back to, we've lent so much to the Met. Well, they've only lent to us twice over the same period. So that gives us a fairly compelling case to say, hey, you know what, we're really going to need something in return. So what we asked for is we asked for a painting by arguably the most important 17th century artist, sort of the inventor of dramatic painting as we know it in many ways, an artist named Caravaggio, actually Michelangelo de Merisi, but he goes by Caravaggio. We have no Caravaggios in the collection, and we've only ever displayed one in 1947 when it was lent to us. Yeah, thanks for moving to the next slide. With that loan, we were then able to secure several other Caravaggios. So in January, we are doing the largest exhibition of Caravaggio that has been done in the United States in the past 15 years. I assure you, this is going to get covered in all of the papers, right? This is the way. This is the way that you start building that reputation over time, right? We have had an incredible museum that has done dynamic programming for 120 years, but our exhibitions over the past 20 have largely been focused on taking shows that were put together by other people. It's when you put together the show yourself that you get the lift from all of that visibility. So this is the type of show that we're not just going to be doing, but we're doing right now. If you move to the next slide. If you have not seen Black Orpheus, Jacob Lawrence and the Mabari Club, you must. It is not only an incredible exhibition that is visually stunning, it is also incredibly important for reasons that are beyond the scope of this conversation. But of course you would expect the museum director to say that, right? Museum directors traffic in hyperbole. Next slide, please. I encourage you to open your Wall Street Journal today and see the print version of this article, which ran over the weekend online, about our exhibition. Do you see how it says Toledo, Ohio, right at the bottom? And it says Toledo Museum of Art right underneath the title to the exhibition. So it's happening. Jacob Lawrence is one of the most important artists of the 20th century. If you go to Wikipedia, there's no mention of his 8-month residency in Nigeria, which, by the way, was his second trip to Nigeria. This is an incredibly important show to understanding Jacob Lawrence. The work is incredible, and the exhibition also puts him in a visual cultural context where you're introduced to artists you've never heard of from Africa and beyond, and you just leave thinking to yourself, oh my God, there's so much great stuff there. Where quality meets belonging, you have revelations. People cover it. And this, by the way, if you wanted to pay for that much advertising in the Wall Street Journal, it would cost you about $6 million. Well, that's not exactly right. If you wanted to pay for that much advertising, that much eyeballs, and that quality content, the advertising value equivalency is about $6 million. So I challenge anyone to tell me where in Toledo our community gets as much great visibility as we do from supporting exhibitions like Black Orpheus and like the Rachel Royce exhibition. This is one of the most important painters of the 17th century. Ever heard of her? Exactly. Her painting sold for more than Rembrandt at the time. She's never had a single artist retrospective. And who are we partnered with? The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and the Alte Pinakothek in Munich. These are the types of people that the Toledo Museum of Art should be working with. Next slide. Ethiopia at the Crossroads. Working with the Walters Museum, which has a huge collection of Ethiopian material in Baltimore, as well as the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts, to do the first comprehensive exhibition on Ethiopian art history, one of the oldest traditions of Christianity, that's been done in this country in 70 years. Right? And I assure you, all of these things are not just going to get extraordinary lift, but in the case of the Ethiopia show, we are in conversations right now with a collector who is not from Toledo, who had never been to the Toledo Museum of Art before we began talking about this exhibition, who does not live in the United States, about what could be one of the largest gifts the Toledo Museum of Art has ever received, because we're showing our commitment to a culture that is meaningful to him. And he is going to be one of the people that I'm going to be visiting on this trip, and I won't tell you where and I won't tell you who. Although my fiance's in the room and she's met him, so if you put a lot of pressure on her, she might say. So these are the types of things. This is not fantasy. This is real, and this is needle moving, not just for the museum, but for our whole community. If you move to the next slide. I've mentioned already that we're thinking about reinstalling as Roger was, but reinstallation in our case is not a leading indicator, or is not leading, it's lagging. So as we reinstall our collection, it means that things are going to come off the wall and they're going to go in different places. And that might make some of you nervous, but things go in different places all the time, right? The 2 Van Goghs are out of the building. Raise your hand if you knew, right? So if I told you the Van Goghs were going to move, you'd say, oh my God, don't move them. They move, things move, right? Nothing is permanent. So as we think about taking things off the wall, it's a great opportunity to package some of our collections and send them on tours. But we're not going to send them on tours to, places just around the country. The demand for the quality of the material, particularly in parts of the world where they entered the market, the rise of the global art, of the private art museum, later means they just can't get these things. If you move to the next slide. So that includes, to a certain extent, Impressionism, our ancient material, right? The Grand Tour and European Masters, of course you can still buy those things, but it won't shock anyone to know that people in the 17th who lived in the 17th century aren't painting anymore. So there's not an endless supply, so to be able to package a show like this is really quite meaningful. So I can't say too much about where we're going to travel these shows, but think Europe, think Asia, right? The Toledo Museum of Art will have full visibility in places all around the world as hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people connect with our collections over a 2-year period while we're reinstalling and get to see not just a single work, but the impact of all of those things. So if we move to the next slide. All of this gives us a beachhead when things are traveling, but also increases visibility in a way that we can parlay into relationships that engender support, not just for the museum, but for this community, to help us develop our collection, right? Many of these people will be collectors, and in parts of the world that are not the United States, they'll have collections that are broader than US collecting interests. So there are great opportunities to augment our collection, just as Roger Mandel did, whether through artist books, Netscape, or beside, and of course through potential other forms of philanthropy. So it's an idea which is evolving, but as I've hopefully convinced you, sort of we're on the right track, and I want to be sensitive to time, so I'll just wrap up with a few more slides. So this is, so we'll leave right here for a second. So here are pictures of fellow Rotarians, Susan Palmer and Tom Palmer in that wonderful purple sweater facing us from our trip to London. This is the picture at left is, or at your left, is from Oxford, from a dinner, and at right, we're in a new museum that opened above Westminster Abbey. So if you want to feel like you're in the Crown, go to this museum, and you can actually look down over Westminster Abbey. It's pretty exceptional. But I show these to say, so in London, this is just because Susan's introducing me, right? Hopefully I've given you a number of different anecdotes. I stole Susan and Tom away for part of the day and took them to, visit someone who is known to have one of the very best collections in London, and had a wonderful hour and a half with him in a pretty incredible space. If we move to the last slide, at a later day, we went to the Wallace collection. So the Wallace collection is maybe the collection that you could argue is the intellectual sort of grandfather of the Toledo Museum of Art. So extraordinary quality built up in a townhome in London. Henry Clay Frick visited twice. It was the inspiration for the Frick. It's this idea that you don't have to be the National Gallery, you don't have to be the British Museum, you can edit down to only the highest quality. And they had an exhibition on dogs, right? Now, I'm not sure that it was the most intellectual conceit ever, but people loved it. And we walked into the gallery and we saw this incredible sculpture, which, believe it or not, is Roman. Right, so this is 2,000 years old, an incredible sort of sculpture, almost intact in marble, of 2 hounds playing with each other. And I made sure that the label is not visible to you, but it was on loan from this very private collector that we had gone to see and that I had seen in his home before being lent here. So it's an indication that we're on the right track, right? We're finding ourselves in spaces where we're meeting people, we're being referred to people, and it's doubling back in ways that we are getting access to people who are committed to what we're doing, right? Who are interested in growing a collection like ours, are interested in this idea of fusing quality and belonging in truly global ways. And the fact that people are taking these meetings, the fact that we can walk into an art museum in London and recognize something from a private collection that, most people would just say, this is a nice thing, shows that we are being invited in, right? We are being invited in. And we're being invited in because we are doing something different. We are actually trying to tell a global art history from 5,000 years ago until today, filtered through the highest quality, because quality is the most democratic concept there is, right? Quality has existed in every culture, every time, every geography. I will say that until I am blue in the face. Quality is the pathway to representation. And because we are executing against that, not just saying we're going to do it, but you can see it in the exhibitions that we're doing. You can see it in the acquisitions we're making. We're at a Tiffany lamp alongside an Armenian manuscript, both of which have been identified by Apollo magazine, the most important magazine in our sort of sphere, as best acquisitions of the month among museums in the months that they were made, right? There's great stuff everywhere. And the more we commit to it, the more full-throated we commit to it, and the more we tell that story, not just through the media, but also through our collection, sending it out in loans and as shows, the more we're going to connect people outside of this community to the incredible things happening at the museum. And when they visit, they'll see the incredible things that you all are doing as well. So thank you for your time. And that's a little bit about what we've been doing internationally. So I think, do we have time for questions, President Travis, or are we over? We're over. What's that?
Adam, thank you very much. That was fascinating. We are a little bit tight on time, so I'm going to be respectful of everybody's time here in the room. So if you'd like to ask Adam some questions, he'll stay afterwards. Adam, in appreciation for presenting today, we'll be adding to your library of Historical Tales of Toledo, authored by past President Clint Mock. We'll also be making a donation in your name to the Polio Plus campaign. So thank you very much again for being here. Okay. Next week, on July 31st, we are going to be reconvening the conversation about our transformational projects. For those of you that were at the meeting a few weeks ago when we discussed it the past time, I think we actually created more questions than answers. So we've gone back, done a little more homework, done a little more conversation around these, and we are going to have another update, but also spend time at the tables getting a conversation going amongst the membership about our transformational projects. Are they the right ones? Are we interested in looking in different directions? Just, again, making this a club decision and a conversation. So please join us next week for that very important meeting. I'd like to mention an upcoming Rotary event this weekend. This Saturday, that's not $1, just for the record. This Saturday, Waterville Rotary is actually having their annual Blues, Brews, and Brats Festival. It's always a good time, so hey, get out, support that other club. I think you'll see that a lot of the clubs are going to start really trying to promote each other to get Rotary's name out in the community even more across all clubs. So go have a good time and support Waterville this weekend. Brad Mish, would you please join me at the podium? And while he is coming up, there is one committee meeting today, and that is actually a gathering of all committee chairs and co-chairs for a quick conversation about this year and things that are expected of the committees. So with that, Brad, if you would.
Sorry for swearing at you and Jackie. For making you do that. And for each of you. It's supposed to be on the screen. Here we are. We are all going to recite the four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it be goodwill and better partnerships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
I ask that you all go out, remember those words, create hope in the world, and have a great week, everybody. Thank you.